the annual Friday Night Lights. It's become annual since Urban Meyer became head coach. But it will be going on in Ohio Stadium this Friday. If you're wondering, wait a minute, isn't that usually like right before football camp starts? Isn't it like in July? Yeah, it has been in the past, but it's not now. Andrew Lind, who covers recruiting for 11 Warriors, you can follow him on Twitter at Andrew M. Lind, joins us right now. Change in the recruiting calendar. Andrew made this move with Friday Night Lights being moved up to June 22nd in this case. Explain exactly why we're seeing Friday Night Lights now as opposed to when it was in the past.
Well, when the NCAA approved the new early signing period and early spring official visits, they also added in a slot in the calendar from late June to late July that says that college coaches can't have any connection with recruits during that time. So instead of doing it right before camp opens and kind of blending in with the season, now they have one big official visit weekend right before the dead period starts.
Well, with this, the new recruiting rules and what's going on, a lot of top prospects are coming on Friday night. I saw on 11 Warriors you posted it. How big of a recruiting weekend will this be? How big of a night, first of all, Friday night is, and also for the weekend in terms of like official visits for some of these top kids?
Well, Friday Night Lights is always a big weekend for Ohio State. It has been, like you said, since Urban Meyer arrived and brought Friday Night Lights with him from Florida. They typically invite, 200, 300 kids and just make a big, celebration of it inside Ohio Stadium. But this year the rules have changed a little bit, and they kind of made it a little bit more exclusive. You can't do an invite-only camp because NCAA rules don't allow that. But they pretty much set it up so that there's 6 kids on an official visit this weekend, and several of them, quite honestly, are on commitment watch.
So give me some of the names that are probably at the top of the list for Ohio State that people should be keeping an eye out for.
Yeah, well, obviously we have Zach Harrison from right up the river in Olentangy Orange. He's taking his official visit this weekend, but he's talked about waiting until August around his birthday to make a decision. But there are several other people, including 2 wide receivers out of St. Louis who have a ton of interest in Ohio State, Marcus Washington and Jamison Williams. They're not teammates, but they're close friends, and this is kind of set up to be one of those weekends where if Ohio State really makes a push for both of them, they've been the favorite for both Washington and Williams for quite some time, and it just really is set up to be one of those weekends for them to possibly commit. Another person is St. Thomas Aquinas cornerback, Jordan Battle. A lot of people thought that he was going to come up and commit during the spring game, but they pushed it back to this weekend. And, all indications show that all 3 of them could commit.
So just so I understand, anybody could. I thought Friday nights was an exclusive group where it was invite only, but what you're saying is that any kid can decide to come to this?
Yeah, it's very similar to the one-day camps that they had over the last 2 weeks, except for instead of it being at the Woody Hayes Center, they have it at Ohio Stadium. And in years past, it was typically they brought the who's who of high school recruits to this event, but it has never really been an invite-only kind of thing. Like there have been kids who aren't ranked or are 3 stars and so forth that have shown up and just it's available to anybody, but because they waited a really long time to announce it. They announced it on Monday and, have set up these official visits. It's pretty much an exclusive event.
Yeah, because Urban's son lit it up, last year, a couple years ago?
Nate Meyer,
yeah. 2 years ago.
Yep. And in terms of fans, I had some people tweeting, fans can go and watch this, can't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what another thing that's different from the one-day camps is that's only open for parents and the kids, obviously. And then this, they open up the stadium. They typically have, the national championship trophy there. They'll probably have the Cotton Bowl trophy in the general concourse area, and the lower level is open to anybody who wants to come, as long as you pay the $5 parking outside, and everything else is free. They have the concession stands open, and you can kind of mingle with all the reporters who are there, and the parents who are watching their kids and all that.
Visiting with Andrew Lind, 11 Warriors, covers recruiting for him. Again, big recruiting time for Ohio State in the summer, and Friday Night Lights and some official visits coming on this weekend. Craig Young is the latest commitment, the athlete from Fort Wayne, Indiana. and I guess he's going to be at Friday Night Lights as well. But what is Ohio State's vision for this kid in terms of like ratings? This is one of the lower rated kids, but obviously Ohio State sees something in him. What, Andrew, attracts Ohio State to a Craig Young?
Yeah, it's actually kind of funny, though, because in the week, well, it hasn't even been a week. It's been 3 days since he committed. But in the 3 days since he committed, all of the recruiting services have bumped him up. He went from a 650-ish composite score to he's in the 500s now.
What a surprise, Stan, right?
Happen.
That's what we said yesterday, Andrew. Stan goes, you watch his recruiting ratings go up now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of the problem, and I spoke with his coach right before he had committed and kind of got a scouting report on him, and he told me, he's obviously a very, very athletic kid, very determined. He grew up an Ohio State fan, so he told me a long time ago that if he had ever gotten, a committable offer from Ohio State, that he would jump all over it. But the only hang-up on that was that they have several other wide receivers, including the two who I had mentioned before, kind of higher on their board. He's, a little bit, I wouldn't say a little bit slower than the other ones, but he's not a true wide receiver as the other wide receivers on their board. He's, kind of a tweener between wide receiver, tight end. And so they gave him a shot at the camp last week and said, hey, show us what you got on defense. And they put him at safety, linebacker, and defensive end, and he just blew away, head coach Urban Meyer and the rest of the defensive staff.
Very interesting. And there's guys, the thing about those position camps and also what we're going to see on Friday Night Lights, I know there's a lot of kids that are committed that are there, Andrew, but you often see guys work their way into scholarship offers, do you not?
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely a handful of kids over the years who have made it a priority to come to these camps. I know Darren Lee was a very notable one. Took him actually 2 camps to prove to Ohio State that he deserved to be in the class, and obviously went on to have a stellar career and is still playing in the NFL. And then like last year, Master Teague showed up, running back out of Tennessee. They had evaluated him for a long time and said, hey, come, prove to us that you're worthy of becoming a Buckeye. And he went out there and did it, got an offer, committed a couple days later, just like Craig Young.
All right, Zach Harrison, you mentioned who's going to be here. This kid's unbelievable. 6'6". He's a sprinter in track, weak side defensive end. He's one of not only the top player in Ohio, but he's one of the top players in the country. Who's Ohio State's competition? Is it the usual suspects, Big Ten wise? The Michigan, Penn States. Where does Ohio State stand with him?
Yeah, it's actually Michigan, Penn State, and the Ohio State fans aren't going to like to hear this, but Clemson. And he's kind of one of those kids who stays completely off the radar, doesn't like to talk to reporters. I mean, he made a joke a couple weeks ago with us at a camp up at Massillon that he doesn't talk to anybody unless there's cameras shoved in his face. And quite honestly, that's what it's been. He hasn't tipped his hand one way or the other. Obviously, everybody thinks that he's going to end up at Ohio State just because he's 15 minutes up the road from campus. And, I would like to think, based on the information I've gathered, talking with him, his family, and stuff like that he's going to end up at Ohio State. But at the same time, I think it would be foolish to just assume that. He's a very talented kid, a very smart kid, and he's going to make the best decision for himself. He's not just going to do what everybody else assumes he's going to do.
Hey, Andrew, before I let you go, where is Ohio State in its pursuit of a quarterback? There was depth at that position. With Joe Burrow's departure, though, it's thin this year. Who are guys the staff is looking at down the road who, may or may not be at Friday Night Lights, but to build some depth in that quarterback room?
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen Ohio State target a number of different quarterbacks this cycle, anywhere from Wisconsin commit Graham Mertz to a Texas kid named Grant Gunnell, who ended up committing to Arizona. At various points in time throughout the cycle, they've been connected to different quarterbacks and just never really been sold on one. I know Coach Meyer and Coach Day have both talked about how this year's class is a little bit weaker than the rest. So after Mertz just came out and said that he was shutting down his recruitment, and from everything that I've gathered, he was their top target. But he's going to stick with the Badgers, and that is kind of forcing them to move on to a different moving a different direction. And there's a quarterback coming up this week. He's a 3-star out of Florida, Ryan Maurer. He has kind of flown a bit under the radar this year. Comes from a very big school in Florida, plays against really good talent, but just flown a bit under the radar because he's grown a bit this over the last 5-6 months, and he actually punched his ticket to the opening final. So he's definitely a quarterback who is seeing his stock rise. So they invited him up for Friday Night Lights, and he's going to throw in front of Coach Day and possibly get an offer. And I think that if he does get an offer, he'll become their top target.
All right, Andrew, it should be fun. I know it's going to be a busy weekend for Ohio State and for you covering this stuff. We appreciate you taking a few minutes for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on.